We'll go and get started. My name's Chris Risher. I lead our consulting and advisory division here at OnePath. I want to circle to everyone else on the call, Q and Luke, but first I want to make sure everyone understands what we're talking about here. We're going to be setting examples for what the importance of AI governance, whether that's governance, risk, and what that looks like for organizations and what the process is. So before we kind of step into that, Luke, Q, you guys mind doing some intros, what your background is, and then I'll give my background?
Sure. My name is Luke McOmie. I am the Vice President of Offensive Security with our company here. I'm excited to get the opportunity to jump on the call and talk to all of you about some of the things that we've been looking into and some of the things that we've been seeing from our customers. It should be a good talk today. Q?
Thanks. I'm Qasim. I go by Q. Many of you know me as Q. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at Aviana Healthcare. Currently, we are, as many other organizations, dealing with AI. So figured I'd be here. Let's talk about this. Let's have some fun, and let's share some good insights.
Yeah, good. I do see a couple of questions coming into the chat
Already?
That was good. That's great. By all means, please interrupt us. If you have questions, go and put them in the chat. There's also a Q&A feature, and we'll kind of take a look at those as we circle around. This is totally intended to be kind of radio style, so please interrupt us if you'd like to ask some specific questions. We do intend to use the chat feature versus having kind of volume-based interaction within this webinar here. So please interrupt us, as I said. A lot of us, so pause for a moment. Can everyone hear us? Can everyone put in the chat if you can hear us? We are off mute.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so everyone can hear us. Perfect. I should probably ask that at the very beginning. Please excuse me. Perfect. Loud and clear. Especially Chris. Oh, yes, I'm very loud. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're going to talk about foundation of AI governance with policy and technical controls. I will call out briefly that we did have a blog recently posted to the website. So after you get done with this webinar, if you want to go to that blog, there will be additional detail that you can get into. There's actually a few different posts for blogs around AI usage and now governance. But I'm going to go and start immediately with a participation question. Please just put it in the chat, and maybe in the future we'll actually do a poll, but we will absolutely share the link. John, if you have access to it really quickly, would you mind dropping the blog link, please, in the chat? Have you encountered a situation where an employee used AI intending to improve their efficiency, but it led to unexpected problems? If so, what was the issue and how did y'all resolve it? You wouldn't mind putting those in the chat, and we'll talk about those briefly before I ask these two fellows if they've had similar situations. And I know that both of them have, or at least can talk to a few different situations out in the world. I know I had one that I can speak to personally. Anybody have a situation where things were AI was utilized, and then maybe we didn't have such a great outcome? Exposed IP. I assume when you're talking about IP, we're talking about intellectual property. Yep, was not correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, that one always happens, right? The number of times that AI comes up with something that's not accurate.
Yeah, we'll talk about employee training later on, and typically we've seen that the more you tell them how the best usage is and how to interact from a prompt engineering perspective with training, it gets a little better, the outcomes do. So, all right, well, at least a few answers, that's good. Exposed IP, that's rough, that's tough. So one thing, so I'll turn this to Q. Q, what have been some situations that you know of where, employees intended the best things, but the outcome wasn't so great?
I think a few years ago, a really good example was with Samsung. They started using ChatGPT for code reviews. Very good intention. There is a lot of time spent on doing code reviews. A lot of that ends up being mundane. So why not just have AI do this? Problem arose when the employees just started copy pasting their code into ChatGPT without any redactions, without taking on sort of sensitive data. I think there were about 3 different instances of this that initially was reported in Economist Korea, then Forbes picked it up, became an international story. So if you were to just go and Google Samsung leak, one of the first things that comes up is that employees were dropping stuff into ChatGPT. And we know ChatGPT and other models can have hallucinations where you can ask them to do something and they come back with something totally different, like Kelsey was talking about giving you wrong info. The other aspect of that also is it can pull information from its training model that was meant to be sensitive and ends up exposing that intellectual property. In this case, it could be your source code.
That seems to probably connect with our attendee that says they had exposed IP.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it does take a lot of context when you're going back and forth with an AI to understand the response and then correct where it makes sense. Because I can't even count how many times where I have to, it's a 4, 5, 6 go back and forth with the AI, almost like for some of us that are from an app dev background or a data analytics background, we call it rubber ducking. We'll use the AI as a rubber duck to bounce ideas off of, but you have to have an interaction with it so it understands the context you're coming from. That's a good call out, Q. What about you, Luke?
I think the one that first comes to mind is, a few years ago, and again, this kind of a black eye for us, but a few years ago, we were leaning very heavily into trying to automate a lot of the kind of first things you do in just about any pen test that's done, right? We're looking at from efficiency standpoint. And this has become something that's pretty common practice within the industry now. But we had a client that had a fairly archaic old backup solution. It was a tape backup solution within their environment. And the AI actually found a 0-day, where that sounds like it's a really good thing. The problem is the AI was discovered because the hacking tool that we had just started passing what it thought were valid URLs to this tape backup, right? HTTP injection type stuff, just basic, can I pass this command? Will it accept it? And what we discovered was that there were a series of commands that were able to be passed to the backend server that it would then execute without the user having to authenticate. One of the commands that it sent was a delete command. Mm-hmm. And our AI tool deleted 7 terabytes of a customer's backup. Yes, they were able to recover. Yes, it ended up being okay in the end. Yes, it was a real vulnerability and a real finding, and it became something that, that we had to work with the customer and with the company that affected by. But it was an example where a human that was testing this would have most likely said, I'll try these other things like get info or show screen or whatever those commands are, not delete all history, right? Where AI doesn't understand that delete all history is probably a bad idea to test with. I think that's a good example where, we were trying to do good things and trying to find a better way and a more efficient and effective, more valuable way for our customers to do testing, but quickly got burned in the fact that there wasn't much intelligence behind that AI.
Yeah, that makes sense. That hits home a lot with the scenario we had where we had someone utilize AI to build out a PowerShell script to go off and do something within Active Directory, a thing for like identity within a company. That PowerShell script disabled some users, not intended to, but we're trying to get something out really fast. And when we rush, we start utilizing tools in ways that they're not intended to be utilized. And that tends to be, the outcomes aren't the best.
Story just came to mind. Anybody ever watched Silicon Valley, the TV show?
Yeah, that was great.
When Guilfoyle uses Son of Anton to do source code reviews and asks it to make the code better, and it just deletes the whole code repository.
Yeah.
It's like
Yep.
the best way to get rid of vulnerabilities is just delete the code.
Yep, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. It's that interpretation of the right path by the AI that it brings up the questions of, well, I can do this, but should I? The AI does. It's a lot. That's a psychological like question that the AIs aren't really ready to digest yet. You gave me a command. I'm going to figure out for myself what the best approach is. Because that always reminds me, and I'll move on to the next topic here in just a second, but it reminds me of iRobot. My logic is undeniable when it decides, oh, humanity is not, best for this world. So we have to be aware of that when we're interacting with AI. I did see a question a very deep question. As the leader of my company, I worry about having little control over who is uploading, entering, or pasting data. We have communicated a policy, but there's no way to know for certain. I have no faith that even if you hit the button not to share with the LLM, large language model, for those that may not know that acronym, all the data is going somewhere.
Yeah,
Definitely
that's a valid
understand that.
concern. I would say that not only is that a valid concern, there are companies that people lean into to trust with this stuff, right? Copilot, ChatGPT, the stuff Microsoft, Samsung, all the others that are doing, these are big companies, and you hope that they're handling and treating that data correctly. But that's exactly what it is. It's a hope, right? Microsoft really went the extra mile, and they wrote a whole thing when they started introducing AI like Copilot in, and it expressed how they're keeping your data separate, why they're keeping it separate, how this stuff is being protected, things that you can do to even validate and ensure that your data hasn't been leaked. I think that is an awesome step that they took to try to lead that effort. But you're absolutely right. When you look at all these different applications and tools that are out there, people are using all these different things to write code. It kind of reminds me at first, Q, you've got good stories in the past with this, with pen testing, but Pastebin used to be a place where you'd find all this stuff about company and customer data, where people would just put something up, not realizing the potential impact it had. And the other one that we've seen is looking at code repositories, right? GitHub.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen a corporation get compromised because somebody has uploaded like a static key within an application that's now in clear text out in a public site? So I don't think that this is a new problem that we're facing. I just think it's another avenue that we have to be aware of and be concerned about. I think that, going back to the point of kind of our presentation today, governance, policy, education, those are the types of things that are going to help kind of curb this risk.
Okay. I would encourage anyone that's interested in that question to definitely reach out to us. We can help with data loss prevention policies, which any kind of LLM, especially if you're using Copilot, it's going to listen to the DLP. It is also going to listen to any kind of permissions that are put in place around the different data that are being asked of Copilot. We can also use content filtering to potentially disconnect users from outside LLM tools, whether that's Gemini from Google, ChatGPT, pick a thing. So we can definitely help with some technical controls. If you want to reach out to your account manager, or reach out to us in general, and we can help you put some technical controls in place. Because I definitely hear we wrote a policy, but no one really reads our policy. Right. Yeah, that's always the issue. Yeah, so if we moved on to what foundational and strategic themes we need to utilize to put AI policies in place, Q, in your experience, what are the most critical foundational principles that organizations should establish before developing an AI governance framework, especially given the rapid pace of AI advancement?
I think that before you even get to that, one of the things we all need to realize is our employees are going to use AI regardless. If they've got an iPhone, they have Apple Intelligence built in. If they've got a Google phone, they've got Gemini built in. Right? If they have Samsung, they've got their own AI. Everybody's got their own AI platform now. So your employees are going to use AI. When it comes to the governance, what you need to realize is the principles for AI are not any different than other platforms we've had, as Luke was mentioning. So start with risk mitigation. You need to understand what data you have before you can start protecting that data. So what risk does bringing in an AI platform create for my data, for my sensitive data, for my intellectual property? Another principle I think towards one of the foundational ones to me is what sort of bias will this AI platform bring in? If you are using AI to make decisions, imagine if you're using it to make hiring decisions. Which employees are you going to interview? Any bias in the AI model from whichever way you're trained will also result in bias towards your hiring programs. Lastly, before I turn it over to Luke or back to you, trust and compliance. You need to think of trust as one of the foundational rules, one of the foundational benefits that AI could provide if you were to implement it in a way that provides transparency, that provides usability to your employees. I started out saying that your employees will use it. So if you provide them an AI platform that can actually help solve their problems instead of just being one more tool, you're building trust with your employees while also implementing a solution that is trustworthy.
Yeah, I like that.
One thing I'll just call out quickly on the bias there, I remember a bunch of loan processing companies, banks. They got caught, and there have been millions of dollars, probably billions at this point, in got taken away from different banks because they had bias in their AIs and how they were approving loans.
Yep.
So
I'm going to wax a little on this one. When we look back historically at the industry, 60s and 70s, right? 1960s, 1970s is when we really started seeing the government specifically lean into governance, risk and compliance type movements. And it really was a cat and mouse game as to them identifying and realizing that there were all these things that needed to be in place to properly protect because there was these new releases of technology, right? When you look back at the 80s, you'll see businesses that were hesitant to adopt large databases for storing all of their customer records and all their orders and everything else because they'd always done it by hand. But now the idea of thinking, now today thinking about running a business by paper is absolutely insane, right? I would say we saw the same thing not 10 years ago with the adoption of cloud. Many companies out there refused to put anything in the cloud because it was somebody else's network, somebody else's computer. Shared tenancy was a problem, right? What's going to make sure that my neighbor can't see my data or my data can't be there? We look at it today, every business is in the cloud. Every business is utilizing these types of tools. AI is very much the same way. To Q's point, you can implement all kinds of blocks and things to stop people from doing it. You can make strict policies around, what they can and cannot do. I think the way to be successful in this is you're going to have to adopt and accept the fact that this technology exists and that it's something that is very commonplace, very valuable and useful in many, many ways. And then the idea is to try to get ahead of the game when you're creating your compliance and your governance around this stuff. And you have to do that by literally kind of tabletopping and playing through this and asking yourself, what are ways that people would use this tool within our business? And what are the ways that we could potentially be compromised? I think by having those types of conversations, we can get a bit ahead of the curve. Leaning back what was it? It was 2002 was when Sarbanes-Oxley dropped. And that was really when the industry started using the term GRC, right? Like it had always been there, but that's when it became this structure, this format, this framework that people could leverage to then, assess themselves against these various controls. NIST does it, CIS now does it, all of these have it. I think we're going to see very much the same type of a thing come from the leaders around AI. And we're going to start seeing recommended controls and recommendations that businesses need to adopt as part of their even basic, simple, acceptable use policy. And I think that those are types of things that, will be backed by education. I think the more that we can educate and train people in the risks that exist, as well as the capabilities, the talent, and the tools that they can leverage to make their job easier, I think that just like security, it'll start becoming part of the conversation versus being something we're thinking about after the fact.
Okay. I think that's a good segue to the next question that I had. With the rapidly evolving regulatory landscape, because it feels like it changes every 5 seconds, how do you recommend organizations approach ensuring ongoing compliance, and what role does continuous monitoring of those frameworks play? And I would, Luke, I'd like to hear your response to that.
Yeah, sure. I think that, really being able to adopt different rules, different controls, different ways to approach this is going to be the key. And it's not something that's going to be industry wide, right? This is going to have to be tailored and tuned to the specific businesses. They're going to have different needs based upon the industry they're in. They're going to have different needs based upon the size of their company, the number of employees, the technology they have deployed. So I think that we're going to see first the industry really come out with some general rules and topics around kind of best practices. Those best practices will then kind of formalize themselves into policy and into controls that you're going to see implemented within business. And then I think that the adoption of those and figuring out how to customize those or tailor those to your specific business is going to be key to making sure that the effort, the time, the energy, the money being spent is going to be valuable. What I really don't want to see is what we've seen historically with like some of the NIST guidelines are a good way to look at it, right? They're written to be industry wide, meaning any business can apply these things and use them and see value out of them. The problem is that some of them are so broadly written and or not even applicable to specific businesses that it actually becomes more of a hassle than it does a value to go through these efforts. So I would say that I think that what people aren't realizing yet is that you're about to start seeing AI architects and AI engineers coming to work within technology groups inside of companies. We're already seeing this in very large organizations, even within like federal government agencies. I think you're going to start seeing that in 2025, 2026. That's going to be a new job title that's going to become kind of the common, kind of the norm for people, because you've got to have somebody that understands this stuff, that can help translate it, and who can help really make sure that they're on top of it. Just as you do with like security or defense or engineering, you're going to see someone that's their focused role.
Focused role on monitoring the regulations as they change.
Monitoring it's going to be another component to both GRC and to IT. I think you're going to have the technology side of it with the people that are watching and leveraging the LLMs to advance the business, as well as having people who are on the GRC side whose focus is really around how we're leveraging and utilizing these technologies as we move forward.
Would you add anything to that, Q?
I think one of the things I would like to add to it is, before you even wait for the regulation to really get implemented, as Luke was mentioning, start working towards it. One of the things we're looking at here in our organization, everybody is adding AI. Either they are an AI first tool or they are AI enabled tool. Your Atlassian has AI now, your Workday, your Oracle, like every company out there at this point has some sort of AI built into it. Even if it's just a bunch of if statements, at least they're calling it AI. So we are starting to implement an AI steering committee. We want to understand and inventory what AI capabilities exist in our organization with which tools, and how are they being utilized. Do we have the option to enable or disable that AI capability? And if we do decide to enable it, how will that benefit us as an organization and our employees? Because if there is no benefit to that another AI agent in the organization, then why even worry about having one more thing to manage?
So I think I heard an action item there. A key consideration for an action item is, do you have a steering committee in place for the governance of AI or not?
Mm-hmm.
If I were to say to our attendees, does anybody have a steering committee? Are you considering a steering committee? Anybody in the audience already have a steering committee in place for the consideration of AI, or are you guys considering one?
And a single person does not matter.
Yeah.
Committee is more than one person, more than one department.
Because it needs to be cross-functional.
Yeah. You need your developers in there. You need your product engineers. You need your HR, because they're going to have their HR tools that use AI. You need your security and compliance in that.
Yeah. And we can absolutely help. I saw someone saying they're trying to build one. We can help work with you to build a cross-functional team or a tiger team, if you want to call it that. That's what we used to call it in college. I don't know if people still use that term anymore, but we used to call them tiger teams.
I don't think
Might be
Luke was
dating
ever
myself.
called Tiger Team. just
Might be
don't
dating myself a
YouTube
little
it.
bit. And I want to circle back to our previous question around how we can get technical controls in place. How do you, Q, how do you recommend organizations handle the security fencing around AI models and the data access for those AI models?
Before the implementation of AI, you need to think of it as one of the themes that continues to come up in this conversation is AI is just one more tool. You don't need to treat it any differently than anything else in your environment. Whenever you bring in a vendor to your environment, you need to do vendor risk assessment. Whenever you bring in a new tool to your environment, you need the same thing. So with your AI, I highly recommend that before turning that on, you need to go through some sort of a risk assessment, some sort of a third-party risk assessment of the vendor that is building the AI, but also the tool itself. Maybe perform pen testing of that tool. Ask the AI if you have an AI in your environment whose job it is to answer questions about HR things. Instead of having an HR employee answer those questions, you have a bot now on your website, on your HR portal that does it. Maybe you ask that bot to tell you the salary for your boss. Do that sort of a pen test, that sort of assessment of it to understand how it is being implemented and how it is trying to protect your information, your data. So go through the vendor risk assessment, go through the application assessment of that AI or some sort of AI pen test. Ask that vendor that is building the AI to provide you with their documentation of cybersecurity principles, of their own assessments. If they don't have it, and the business still wants that AI, you need to think towards risk acceptance, risk transfer. Typical things still come back to haunt us, right? So work through that. It does not need to be a completely new thought process. We already have the tools. We already have had vendor risk management. We already had security testing. We just need to implement that on AI too and be ahead of it. One of the reasons we are inventorying all of our AI in the environment is because we need to know whenever a tool out of nowhere just enables AI.
You want to add anything to that, Luke?
Yeah, I would. I very much agree with Q. I think the one thing I'd add to it is a bit of real world story that we are dealing with right now. We have a customer that came to us, and because this is some of what's top of mind for them, for years they have looked at all these different controls that they need to have in play. And for once, because of this need, we're now seeing them spend a bunch of time and money on data classification. Literally something that is one of those controls that almost every requirement out there, doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's something that gets mentioned in a control that people often are like, yeah, everything's classified the same thing. It's private inside the company, and they walk away from it. What we're finding out is that through needing to implement filters, controls, different solutions like DLP, you have to be able to have that data be classified or flagged in some way, or at least stored in a location that tells the user or the hardware or the software, whatever it is that is looking at it, what that data is. So there are little gotchas like that and things that I think that people, when they start jumping into this, right, they jump into the pool kind of at the deep end, they start figuring out very quickly they have to figure out how to swim first, right? And some of that stuff is basic stuff: asset inventory, data classification, the ability to have enforceable policy. That was another huge one, right? There's a million people out there that have all these different acceptable use policies around how they can do stuff. People have even, as I said, brought in AI into those acceptable use policies, saying now, you will push no customer or company sensitive information to any AI, or you face, a violation or some kind of a deal. I think that one of the things that needs to be talked about is making sure that those policies that you're implementing actually have teeth, right? There has to be some kind of a feedback loop on that where, the 10th time that somebody's uploaded customer data to ChatGPT, that probably should have been 8 or 9 times too many, right? So I think that that's something else that people need to think about that's not necessarily top of mind when they're thinking about bringing AI into their environment.
Yeah, we have been working with clients on data sensitivity labels. because the AI model is going to work within those sensitivity labels, whether it's classified as highly confidential, highly sensitive, whatever labels you want to call it, but classifying it in that way, that may even be something. I remember someone that had issues with an exposed IP. You can have sensitivity labels having to do with product specific IP that the AI has to abide by, especially in co-pilot scenarios. It's going to abide by those sensitivity labels that we can utilize within a data loss prevention policy and technical control. For those that are interested in that, please definitely reach out to us. We can help you with an implementation there. I wanted to get to another audience question here really quickly. I know that we're kind of right up against time because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A, but I do want to ask the audience a question around training programs. For me, at least, training programs on effective AI usage for the organization, for the employees, for the team members is our first layer of defense against almost like insider risk of maybe bad usage of AI. So here's the question. Has your organization implemented an AI usage training program? If so, what benefits have you observed? Can we get maybe a few answers from the audience? We'll wait for response here.
You need like elevator music for this time.
The Jeopardy theme, right?
And I just want to remind everyone, there is a Q&A section. By all means, put your questions in the chat. But if you look at the Q&A section, you want to put the questions in there, that'd be great too. I don't know if anyone has put in like a training program for AI usage, like proper AI usage. That's something we'd be happy to help connect you guys with, because that's, to me at least, is the first step in the right direction. We have a training. Oh, good. That's good to see that, somebody's just out of curiosity, what have you used to put that training program in place? Just to share with the rest of our team here. Yes, we can absolutely help you with a training program. All right. Well, I'll kind of move on from here. I know that we're kicking up against like a formal Q&A time. I wanted to wrap with just one in a sentence. One sentence. You get top two. That tops 2 sentences. What is the most important takeaway you want our audience to have from this discussion? I know it's a big question, Q, but if you can wrap it up in 2 sentences or less, go for it.
I think the primary takeaway I'll want you to walk away with is your employees are using AI, whether you are offering it or not. So may as well offer them a good AI platform that is organization mandated or organization governed. And then follow that up with the periodic training, as we were just talking about. The employees, they need to know how to safely use it. They need to know how to identify bias and hallucinations in AI. I know that was not 2 sentences, but
That's
I even
close
have some
enough.
stories in
Close
mind
enough.
too, but I'll
Yeah,
refrain
close
from
enough.
that.
Luke, you get 1 sentence because Q took 3.
Yeah,
As usual.
I haven't seen a lot of good stuff yet. I'm excited to see something like CBT or one of these other platforms come out with some good training. It's definitely something where we can put stuff together for folks, but it's not something that I've seen a lot of good stuff in the industry yet. Again,
Know
I
before
think that was like 10 sentences.
Yeah, Know Before is a good one. I know that somebody called out Know Before. Know Before does have good AI usage training within their system. So at this point, I want to kind of transition us into a Q&A session. We have about 4 minutes. By all means, please drop your questions in the chat or use the Q&A. Oh, I see someone use the Q&A. Let me circle over. Since AI continues to evolve quickly, how do we build a framework that doesn't become outdated within a year? Good question. Luke, you want to take that one? Because you were already talking about what future looks like and how you can prepare for it now.
Right, and that's really the key, is that when you're writing your frameworks or your structures, right, keep it broad and don't get lost in the weeds. I think that where I watch people, kind of walk themselves into a corner to where stuff is going to time out with change, it's because they get too focused on specific controls, specific tools, specific asks. Don't think like that. When you go to write this stuff, think about it more as a generalized statement around, the expectations of how a tool can be used, not necessarily what specific brand of hammer should be that tool, right? So keep it broad, keep it applicable, and keep it flexible. The other thing that you should, with any framework, especially if it's a governance, risk, and compliance framework, it needs to be a living document. It's something that needs to change over time and gets reviewed and looked at, periodically to make sure that it's still applicable and still valuable to the business.
You have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think I agree with Luke. I'll go as far as saying you need to think of your AI governance as two parts. Your core principles of AI governance, the fairness, accountability, transparency, that kind of stuff will always remain the same. Those are the goals you're working towards. Those remain the same. And then the second part to this, which relates to your laws, your tools that you're utilizing, either AI tools themselves or the governance tool you're utilizing, the controls you're utilizing, those can change. And those you review quarterly or annually, depending on your availability or your resources. But the core principles will always stay the same.
Okay. Well, I know that we got 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask, private subscription, okay, we'll take this one. ChatGPT claims to have a quote unquote private subscription. How does private work with ChatGPT, and is my personal data really private to me once it hits any LLM? Q, why don't you take that one?
I've been doing red teaming for many, many years now, and what that has resulted in, I don't trust those terms and conditions. I don't trust what the organizations state. I like to verify that. So I have been using ChatGPT's Pro model for a while now. It's been extremely useful. In fact, I've used it for performance reviews last year. But
yes, you did.
Yes, I did. Yes. Still, even with their claim that it is private, there are nuances to it. And what I like to do still is redact anything personal, anything private. You also have the concept of memories. So if you are using the same account for many years, there may be memories being built up off your account, off your data that you provided it. In fact, go and ask it to be your therapist and give you 5 things to work on. You'll learn really quickly how much it knows about you. So what does private mean to you? Does it mean that nobody else can access it? Or does it mean that you do not want traces of what you provided to it? So maybe you clear those memories periodically. Maybe you redact the data. So it really comes down to your own threat assessment. I know that I answered the question like circular motion in there.
And I know
it's the same thing. Like you hit the nail on the head. One of the things I've loved doing is going and asking these AIs out there online, what do you know about this company? What do you know about this person? It's remarkable to see the information that comes back. And it's not like necessarily Google searchable material that you would be able to go find. It's the kind of stuff where it's like you'll see it reference court cases and documents and stuff that you just would have never ever even thought to look at.
Yeah. They still provide they're still going to be storing that data, even if they say it's private to you, but they're still going to be storing it temporarily to ensure there's no abuse, there's no misuse. You are not asking it to do something illegal. And that's where I start to wonder who else has access to that data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like when they are doing abuse monitoring, are they bringing in another model to take a look at it? Now, does that have your data?
No, they're all obviously really good things to consider. And what I want to call, as we're wrapping up here, I want to call everyone's attention to, we are going to have another webinar on AI usage and implementations and what the assessments look like for actually implementing an AI model that is proprietary to your organization, how you could train Copilot further. Again, I want to call out the blog. And please reach out to us if you need help with developing AI policies, AI governance. We're here to help. If you want to put your name and your email address in the chat, we will definitely circle back and connect with you. It's been great to have everyone. Q, Luke, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Really enjoy your insights, guys. With that, we'll let everyone go. Thanks. Have a great afternoon.